Okay, guys, I know we didn't get through as much as I thought in class yesterday, so you just need a couple more minutes of notes over these In-TASC standards. This is the last slide that you saw, so I'm just going to populate the words. So you've already written this down. Remember, the 10 standards are arranged into 4 big themes. The learner and the learning, the content, instructional practice, and professional responsibility. So here are those kind of 4 areas that we group the standards into. So that's if we look at the arrangement of all 10 standards and how they are grouped. If we look at just one standard, each standard is going to have a couple of components. And so this is like, I don't know, fancy, maybe teacher language, but hopefully can be broken down and it makes sense to you. So each standard is going to have a section called performances. So if you look at the packet that you picked up in school yesterday, one section on the front page of your standard, one section will be labeled performances. Performances are things that a teacher does. So what is the teacher actually doing to meet that standard? Another section of the standard is going to have information related to essential knowledge. And so when I read through the things that are embedded in the essential knowledge, that to me reads as, what does the performances that they did tell you about what the teacher knows about teaching? So the knowledge is kind of like, it's called pedagogy, but basically it means all the things that the teacher probably learned about how to teach. Those are essential knowledge components. And you can usually see those based on the performances, the things that the teacher does. The third section of every standard is called a critical disposition. And this sort of takes what the teacher does and how that tells you what they know about teaching as a process and rolls it into, what does this tell you about who the teacher really is as a teacher? So these are critical dispositions are almost like characteristics or qualities that teacher has. That's sort of been instilled in them based on what they've learned and how they do what they've learned. And so those 3 sections are going to be in every single standard. So I'm going to open up a document here. This is the full In-TASC document. If you looked, it's 57 pages. So this is what I took copies or made copies of for you and gave you each a standard. So I'm just scrolling until we find the first standard. So if you receive standard number 1, you are looking at a standard related to learner development. And here is the actual standard. So what's in bold here is the standard. Here are the performances, what the teacher would do, you would see them doing to meet that standard if you observed them. Here is what that tells you about what the teacher knows about the learning process. And then here are those critical dispositions, those kind of characteristics and qualities. So for example, to meet this learner development standard, you might see the teacher creating developmentally appropriate instruction that takes into account individual learner strengths, interests, and needs, and that enables each learner to advance and accelerate his or her learning. We would see this. So this is like they're creating cohesive content based or creating cohesive activities and lesson plans, things that are developmentally appropriate. So you're not going to give an 8th grader something that maybe a junior is capable of doing, and vice versa. Here are essential knowledge. So what does their creating developmentally appropriate instructions tell you that they know about teaching? Well, that they understand that each learner's cognitive and linguistic, social, emotional, physical development influences learning, etc. That boils down to kind of a core characteristic. I'm just choosing one. The teacher is committed to using learner strengths as a basis for growth and their misconceptions as opportunities for learning. So they do all fit together. And part of what you're going to do as you look at your specific standard is try to summarize, what does this standard mean? What performances, what things would we see in the classroom if we were observing? And then what does that tell us that the teacher understands about the way to teach? And then how does that create who the teacher really is? These kind of core characteristics. Now, while I'm on here, I've also copied for you what are called progressions. So that's a bad example because the progression for standards 1 and 2 are linked, but here is the progression for standard number 3. So this section of the document is going to tell you about maybe what it looks like as the teacher is beginning to master this standard, and then as they mature and become really a true master, here's what you should see in the classroom. And so these colors are corresponding to the colors over here, the performances, essential knowledge, and critical disposition. So here's the progression in performances. Here's what you should see the teacher doing as they mature. Here is the progression in essential knowledge. And then here is the progression for the critical dispositions. So as you start to look at that, part of your task today is to kind of break down your standard, and you're going to tell us about it in class tomorrow on Friday. So last slide, you have been given an essential standard. And so you're going to do the following and create this product. The product is one Google slide. If you need to, then that's okay, but keep it short. And I'll tell you what's going to be on the Google slide. But basically, you're going to read the packet that I gave you, and then you're going to make a Google slide that you can use during Friday's class to teach the class about your particular standard. There is a deadline of 8:45 Friday morning so that I can add these to the slide deck and be ready to go by third period. So what actually goes on your slide? So for your standard, each student will select a standard, research it, and report back. So here is the report, the product, the Google slide. You need the theme. So remember in your notes, all of the standards are grouped into 4 themes. Which theme does this fall within? You need to summarize those 3 major areas. So summarize what the performance looks like, what the teacher would do in class, summarize the essential knowledge. What does that tell you about what the teacher knows about teaching, the actual art of teaching, and then summarize the critical disposition. And I'm thinking like bullets, really summarize. Don't make this a big, long, wordy thing. And then the personal opinion component, this is connected back to the observations that you've already done. So have you seen a teacher actually demonstrate your particular standard? And if so, how? So think of an example of maybe how one of the teachers that you've already observed in your hours did what you just learned and studied and presented on. You don't have to put the personal opinion on the Google slide. You just need to talk about it, tell us the story, connect it when you're actually presenting. And then the last thing is give a brief description of the progression. So what does it look like as the teacher matures in each of those 3 areas that the standard is talking about? So all of these components, you can color your slide, you can make it look pretty, you can put some pictures on it, give us something interesting to look at while you are presenting, but you need to make a slide that has all of these components on it, and you need to share that slide with me by Friday morning, 8:45 a.m. at the very latest. And then be prepared on Friday in class to talk about your slide when it comes up in the slide deck. We'll take them in order. We're going to talk about the standards 1 through 10, and you can share about your standard. All right, that's what I got for you guys. Happy Thursday. See you all tomorrow.